It was just supposed to be a simple day to watch his son, Ryan, graduate, but for Marcus Turner, a former Marine, it quickly became much more. As he arrived at Crestwood High School in Texas, Marcus had no idea that the quiet pride he felt for his son would soon turn into a moment of unspoken defiance. After parking his car and pulling out a worn photograph of his late wife and their son, Marcus felt the familiar pang of loss, but also a sense of determination. Dressed in his sharp Marine uniform, his posture upright and resolute, he made his way into the gym filled with excited families and friends. The ceremony was just beginning when two security guards approached him, demanding he move to the back of the room. Despite his assigned seat, calmly, Marcus showed them his ticket, refusing to be moved. His presence, unflinching and composed, drew attention from the people nearby, but he remained still, his focus solely on his son. What happened next would leave everyone in the room speechless. 6 former military men, his brothers in arms, silently rose from the crowd and took their places strategically around the gym. Without saying a word, they sent a powerful message to the guards. Marcus would not be intimidated. As the tension in the air grew thick, Marcus stood tall, not out of anger but from an inner strength that resonated deeply with everyone watching, reminding them all of what true dignity and resilience look like. Marcus Turner never expected his son's graduation at Crestwood High School to become the stage for a confrontation that would captivate everyone around him. Arriving in his sharp Marine uniform, he had driven 8 hours from his home to be there, not because he wanted attention, but because it was important. The Dodge Charger he drove was his late wife's favorite car, and even 2 years after her passing, driving it made him feel closer to her. As he stepped out, a worn photograph of his wife and son, taken when Ryan was just a baby, was pulled from the glove compartment and tucked into his uniform. It was a promise he had made, to never miss a significant moment in his son's life. His posture was impeccable as he entered the gym, the smell of popcorn and floor wax filling the air, the atmosphere buzzing with excitement as families found their seats. He didn't need to stand out. His calm demeanor and military bearing already did that for him. As he took his seat, he could feel the occasional gaze directed at him, some curious, others unkind, but he remained unaffected. His sole focus was on Ryan, who was somewhere among the students about to cross the stage. The ceremony began, and the national anthem played, where everyone stood, placing their hands over their hearts. Except Marcus. He stood at attention, as was his custom, his entire being a salute to the country and to his son. But the moment of quiet reflection was shattered when 2 security guards approached him. They were not police officers but Harlan security personnel, and they immediately began to insist that Marcus move. They claimed the section was reserved for families of the graduating seniors. Despite his printed ticket confirming his seat, his voice calm, Marcus repeated that he was in his assigned seat and refused to be moved. The guards didn't seem to care. The tall one offered him an excuse, suggesting that he move to the back, even though the seats were clearly still open where he was. He asked for the name of the person who had given the order, but the guards remained unresponsive, trying to pressure him with each passing moment. A crowd began to notice. Eyes shifted. Some were recording the scene. Others whispered among themselves. Marcus sat still, unwavering, his voice growing firmer, but still controlled. The conversation seemed to be escalating, but Marcus was intent on not making a scene. He had driven 8 hours for this moment, and nothing would take it from him. He wasn't angry, but there was something deeper in the exchange, something familiar, something that had followed him through years of service, a silent power that demanded respect. The guards began to grow frustrated, but Marcus stayed silent, his focus never leaving the stage. That's when the real shift in the room occurred. 6 men, all in civilian clothing, started to rise from different sections of the gym. Slowly and methodically, they didn't speak, didn't make any dramatic gestures, they simply moved with purpose, each one quietly taking a spot in the gym. Surrounding the scene, Marcus didn't need to look back to know who they were. He could sense it. These men, his brothers in arms, veterans who knew the cost of honor, had been through wars and still walked through the storms of life with quiet dignity. The guards, now aware of the shift in the atmosphere, glanced nervously at one another. The tension in the air was palpable. The shorter guard tried again, muttering something into his radio, but it was clear that his authority was fading fast. Marcus, still seated, didn't need to do anything else. He was calm, collected, but the presence of these men behind him was enough to make the guards hesitate. A voice from the crowd, cool and controlled, called out to the guards, asking why Marcus was being treated this way. It was Creed Marston, a man Marcus had saved in Kandahar, and with one simple question. The power dynamic had shifted. Creed's voice had a quiet authority that none could ignore, and behind him, the other men stood like shadows, unwavering and ready. The guards, once confident, now seemed uncertain, realizing that they were no longer in control of the situation. The gym was no longer focused on the graduation ceremony. It had shifted its gaze to the quiet strength that Marcus and his comrades had shown. Eventually, the guards backed down, retreating without a word of apology, leaving Marcus to remain seated, silent and resolute. The ceremony continued, but the atmosphere had changed. The students, the families, the staff, they all knew something had happened. It wasn't just about graduation anymore. It was about respect, about standing firm, and about loyalty. When Ryan's name was finally called, and he stepped onto the stage, there was a palpable shift in the room. The applause, initially scattered, now reverberated with respect. Marcus didn't stand, but he didn't need to. The quiet strength he had shown, the way he carried himself in that moment, spoke louder than any applause ever could. This was his moment, and it would never be forgotten. As father and son met outside the gym, a quiet understanding passed between them. Ryan, seeing his father's composure, knew exactly what kind of man he was becoming. Solomon's lesson wasn't in loud gestures but in how he carried himself with dignity. And how, in a world that often tries to tear people down, standing firm in the face of adversity was the truest form of strength. The experience of Marcus Turner at his son Ryan's graduation was not just about a father watching his son take a monumental step forward. It became a moment of quiet strength. A lesson in dignity that would echo far beyond the walls of Crestwood High School. Marcus, a former Marine, had driven 8 hours to attend his son's ceremony, preferring the journey in his late wife's beloved Dodge Charger, a car that still connected him to her after her passing 2 years ago. When he arrived at the gym, his posture was impeccable, his uniform sharp, and his mind focused on his son. The ceremony was filled with the usual noise and excitement, and Marcus settled into his seat among other families, feeling pride and a bittersweet longing for his wife, who would have been beside him, proudly watching their son. But when 2 security guards approached him and ordered him to move to the back of the gym, the situation shifted into something unexpected. Despite his calm response, showing them his assigned ticket, the guards insisted that he relocate, stating that the family seating was full. Marcus, unfazed, stood his ground, refusing to move from his seat. The guards, noticing his steadfastness and the calm strength in his voice, tried to push further, suggesting that he would be more comfortable in the back. Marcus, however, was unwavering. The tension in the air began to build as others noticed what was happening. People began to shift their attention, some recording the encounter, others whispering among themselves. Then, as if on cue, 6 men, none wearing uniforms or badges but all carrying an unmistakable presence, stood up from various parts of the gym. Marcus didn't need to turn around to know who they were. They were his brothers in arms. 6 former military men who had been through the horrors of war with him. Their coordinated movement, their calm but purposeful posture, sent a clear message that they weren't there for drama, but for loyalty. The guards, who had once been assertive, now hesitated. They had not expected any form of backup. let alone backup like this. With the gym now fully aware of the situation, Creed Marston, one of Marcus's old comrades whom he had saved in Kandahar, spoke up. His voice was calm, controlled, and commanding. "Is there a reason this man is being bothered?" The guards, caught off guard by this new development, tried to downplay the situation, but it was clear to everyone that the power dynamics had shifted. Creed wasn't just a fellow soldier. He was a man who had been through hell with Marcus, and his mere presence signified an unspoken strength. The tension in the gym was palpable, and people began to realize that this was no ordinary confrontation. It was a stand for respect and dignity. Marcus remained seated, unbothered by the escalating tension around him. He wasn't angry. Anger wasn't his tool for this moment. Instead, he let his stillness, his calmness, and his unwavering presence speak volumes. The guards, unsure of how to respond, eventually stepped back. The silence in the gym, filled with respect, spoke louder than any words ever could. Marcus's eyes never left the stage. His mind focused entirely on Ryan, who had just crossed a major milestone in his life. But in that moment, his son, along with the entire gym, witnessed the kind of strength Marcus had built over years of service, strength that came not from raising his voice, but from the power of his presence and his ability to hold his ground in a moment of adversity. When Ryan's name was called, the atmosphere had shifted completely. The applause, once scattered and uncertain, now rang through the gym with deliberate intensity, not only for Ryan but for the lessons that had been silently imparted. As Ryan walked across the stage to accept his diploma, he saw the quiet pride in his father's eyes. A father who had never needed to shout or demand attention but whose actions spoke volumes. Marcus's lesson to Ryan, and to everyone present, was clear. True strength is not found in loud gestures or defiance, but in the quiet dignity of standing firm and unshaken in the face of adversity. As father and son met outside the gym, Ryan's sense of pride for his father was undeniable. He had grown up hearing about his dad's service, but now, seeing him in action, he realized that strength wasn't just about physical endurance or bravery in battle. It was about how one carried themselves, how they responded in the face of challenges, and how they remained grounded when the world around them threatened to shake them loose. Marcus's quiet resistance, backed by the presence of his comrades, left a lasting impact not just on Ryan but on the entire gym. In the end, it was not about the ceremony, the diploma, or even the applause. It was about the message that had been sent. Respect, dignity, and loyalty are the true measures of strength. Marcus Turner's experience at his son Ryan's graduation became more than just a family milestone. It turned into an unforgettable lesson in quiet strength, dignity, and the power of standing firm in the face of adversity. Arriving at Crestwood High School in his military uniform, Marcus was prepared to watch his son, whom he had raised through the highs and lows of life, take his next step into adulthood. The weight of his wife's absence, 2 years after her passing, was felt in the small gestures, driving her beloved Dodge Charger, for instance, yet his resolve to be present for Ryan's special day was unwavering. He made his way through the crowded gym, feeling a deep pride mixed with bittersweet memories of the past. It was a moment he had promised to his wife he wouldn't miss, and nothing would take that away. Yet, as the ceremony started, the mood shifted when 2 security guards approached Marcus, instructing him to leave his seat in the family section and move to the back of the gym. Despite his calm response and his ticket confirming his seat, the guards insisted, stating that the area was full. Their demand was about more than logistics. It was an unspoken challenge to Marcus's right to be there. A confrontation he was well equipped to handle, yet one he had not anticipated at his son's graduation. Without hesitation, Marcus refused to comply, his voice firm but calm. He had traveled 8 hours for this moment, and he would not let anyone steal it from him. The guards' attempts to convince him to move grew more forceful, but Marcus stayed seated, his posture as resolute as the training he had received over years of military service. His stillness, coupled with the quiet power of his presence, made the situation increasingly tense as people around him began to notice the unfolding standoff. The air around Marcus began to thicken as others watched the exchange. Some filming it on their phones, others whispering among themselves. Despite the tension, Marcus maintained his composure, never once raising his voice. He wasn't angry, he was simply standing his ground, unwavering in the face of what felt like an unjust demand. His calmness in the situation was a testament to the lessons he had learned through years of service. Lessons not about raising his voice, but about the quiet strength of remaining composed when things got tough. What happened next was nothing short of remarkable. As the guards' frustration grew, 6 men slowly began to rise from various parts of the gym, each one moving deliberately, with the quiet intensity that spoke volumes. They didn't speak, didn't make a scene. Instead, they positioned themselves strategically around Marcus. They were former military men, veterans who had served alongside Marcus, and their solidarity was unmistakable. Marcus didn't need to look back to know who they were. The presence of these men, men who had been through the worst together, brought an immediate shift in the dynamic. The guards, who had once been confident in their authority, now hesitated, their earlier bravado slipping away as they realized they were outnumbered and outclassed. The tension in the gym was palpable, and the crowd's attention shifted from the stage to the unfolding confrontation. One of the men, Creed Marston, a fellow veteran whom Marcus had saved in Kandahar, spoke up, his voice calm but firm. He asked the guards why they were bothering Marcus, why they were making an issue out of something so simple. His words were not shouted in anger but spoken with the quiet authority that only someone who had faced real danger could command. It was clear to everyone watching that this was no ordinary confrontation. It was a stand for respect, for dignity, and for honor. The guards, caught off guard by this unspoken show of force, began to retreat. The tension that had once filled the gym began to dissipate, and the atmosphere shifted from uncertainty to a deep, collective respect. Marcus, still seated, didn't need to say another word. His calmness, combined with the solidarity of his comrades, had sent a message louder than any words could convey. His son, Ryan, watching from the stage, felt a swell of pride in his chest as he witnessed his father's quiet strength in action. Ryan had grown up hearing stories about his father's service, but it was in that moment, watching the men rise in defense of his father, that he truly understood the depth of what his father had endured. The real lesson wasn't in what Marcus had done on the battlefield. It was in how he carried himself when faced with injustice. He had remained calm, composed, and unshaken, showing Ryan, and everyone else in that gym, that strength wasn't about shouting or confrontation. It was about the quiet power of standing firm in the face of adversity. The ceremony continued, but the gym had changed. What started as a simple graduation had transformed into a powerful lesson on manhood, respect, and the true meaning of strength. Marcus's actions, though quiet, had spoken volumes. It was a moment that not only defined him but also taught everyone present, including Ryan, that the greatest strength often lies in how we carry ourselves when the world around us tries to challenge our dignity. Marcus Turner's quiet strength at his son Ryan's graduation became a powerful lesson in dignity, resilience, and the silent courage it takes to stand firm against adversity. When Marcus arrived at Crestwood High School, he wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary. He was simply there to watch his son walk across the stage and mark a monumental milestone in Ryan's life. The drive had been long, 8 hours in his late wife's beloved Dodge Charger, a car that kept her memory alive for Marcus even after her passing 2 years ago. But as he entered the crowded gym, settled into his seat, and prepared to watch his son graduate, a seemingly simple interaction soon turned into an unforgettable moment of resistance. 2 security guards approached Marcus with an unwarranted demand. He had to move from his assigned seat in the family section and relocate to the back, despite showing his ticket and calmly explaining that he was in the right place. The guards insisted on making him leave. Marcus, however, refused to be moved. His voice remained steady, his demeanor calm, and though there was pressure mounting from the guards, he knew he wasn't going to back down. This moment wasn't just about the seat, it was about respect. About a father refusing to let anyone take away the honor of watching his son graduate. The situation began to escalate, drawing attention from those nearby. Some people started to notice the exchange, others even recording it on their phones. But Marcus remained still, his body language showing that he wasn't about to move, not because of defiance, but because he understood the deeper significance of the moment. The guards pushed, offering him alternative seating, but Marcus wasn't about to let them rewrite the terms of his presence there. It was then that the real shift began. One by one, 6 men rose from the crowd. They moved without speaking, without any overt signals. They simply stood up, took positions throughout the gym, and created a powerful, silent presence. Marcus didn't need to turn around to know who they were. They were his brothers in arms, veterans who had fought beside him in some of the toughest circumstances imaginable. Their quiet solidarity spoke volumes. The guards, who had once been assertive, now faltered, realizing they were not in control of the situation anymore. They were no longer just dealing with an upset father. They were confronted by men who had faced war, who understood what loyalty, respect, and honor meant. The air in the gym shifted. It became clear to everyone that Marcus wasn't alone. And this wasn't just a father fighting for his seat, it was a stand for what was right. One of the veterans, Creed Marston, who Marcus had saved in Kandahar, spoke up, his voice calm yet commanding. He asked the guards why they were bothering Marcus, why they were making a scene out of something so trivial. His question was simple but effective. The guards, caught off guard by the sudden presence of these men, hesitated. The moment of power had shifted, and without raising their voices, the men made it clear that Marcus's dignity would not be challenged. Creed's presence alone reminded everyone in the room that respect is something earned, not demanded by force. Marcus sat silently, his eyes never leaving the stage, watching Ryan, the reason for all of this, prepare to walk across that stage. The tension in the gym had reached its peak, and yet Marcus remained unmoved, not out of defiance, but because he understood that real strength isn't always about fighting back. Sometimes, the most powerful act of resistance is simply staying calm, remaining unshaken, and standing your ground. By the time Ryan's name was called, the energy in the gym had shifted. The clapping was louder, more deliberate, not just for Ryan but for the silent stand of respect that had been shown by the men surrounding Marcus. The moment wasn't lost on anyone in the room. It wasn't just about the diploma being handed to Ryan. It was about the silent strength and dignity that had been demonstrated in that space. Ryan, as he walked across the stage, understood something deeper about his father in that moment. The stories he had heard about his dad's time in the military, the medals, the sacrifices, all of it became clearer to him now. His father wasn't just a soldier in uniform. He was a man who had endured so much and yet carried himself with dignity and strength in every situation. When Marcus and Ryan finally met outside the gym, it wasn't just a proud father and son hug. It was a shared moment of understanding. Ryan realizing the weight of the lesson his father had just imparted. Marcus, through his quiet strength, had shown Ryan that true manhood is not about raising your voice or demanding attention. It's about how you carry yourself when things get tough, how you stand firm and dignified, even when the world around you tries to tear you down. The lesson was profound. It's not just about how you react in difficult moments. It's about how you remain grounded, unshaken, and true to your principles. And that, Marcus knew, would be the greatest gift he could give his son. As the day continued and the crowd began to thin, the true significance of what had just happened would remain with everyone who had witnessed it. It wasn't the ceremony, the diplomas, or the applause that would be remembered. It was the strength, the respect, and the silent power of standing firm for what's right.